Hello, Julie. It's just you and me. We can just talk about hormones. Kidding.
Oh
Couple-
no.
Well, I'm a couple minutes early, and
Well, I'm glad I'm here. Yeah, we still have a few minutes.
yeah, people are usually a little late.
Yeah.
Are you my same Julie who's in my mold course or no?
No,
Okay.
I'm brand new here.
Oh, okay. Well, nice to meet you. Where are you from?
I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay, okay. What are your hormone symptoms?
Well, my hormone issues are menopause, past menopause. So hair loss is what's plaguing me. Um, so that's my main concern.
Okay. What have you looked into so far, as far as that goes?
Well, so it started strangely around COVID.
Mhm.
And the first time that I experienced it was shortly after I got the vaccine. Um, and then I had gone to a dermatologist. He gave me cortisone shots. That helped some. And then I started doing like B vitamins and collagen. So it has, like, I've had periods where it was better. Um, but then recently it started getting worse again. So the only change that I can think of now that may have made a difference was I saw a naturopath in the beginning of summer, and he suggested I take a B6. So I started taking that where before I had been taking a B complex.
Mm, okay.
And so I don't know if that could have been a difference.
Okay. Did you get anything checked about your immune system, like antibodies or like immune
So
stuff?
yeah, well, previously, like my regular PCP, I tested thyroid. She said it was normal. But when I went to the naturopath, I had a hair analysis done, and he said there were thyroids low and adrenal.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like it came on like kind of suddenly?
Um, I yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
suddenly,
So
like when it started in 2020, yes. Now it's kind of like,
goes up and down a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I was just looking up and I put one thing in the chat. Actually, might as well hit record while. It's recording already. Okay. Ladies who are coming on, Julie was talking about hair loss that started after COVID vaccine. So I was just looking up hair loss after COVID vaccine and kind of like with a lot of symptoms, whether you had this vaccine or you had COVID, there can be
Right.
similar symptoms. Yeah, because it's like the spike proteins and yada
That's
yada.
what I found. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're not the only one who experienced it, but yeah, now how do you regulate your immune system? I definitely, yeah, thyroid is important. Hair loss can have a lot of reasons, uh, tons of reasons, like shock, heavy metals, thyroid disorders, mold. Um, but since you had a clear starting point, it seems like you're probably in that like long COVID type. But it's good that you respond to the B vitamins and some collagen and stuff. So it's probably giving the hair some nutrition. But if you want, I can drop in the chat later. It's not like some long COVID protocol information.
Okay. Yeah, I also know from having the hair analysis that there's no toxic metals, so I can rule that out.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, hi
And my
everybody.
cortisol, I guess, is high. So,
Okay. Okay. Well, we can ask Mariza about that one.
okay.
Julie and
Thank
I were the first one on here. Yeah, you're welcome. Julie and I were on here, so we just started talking. Hello. Welcome, my friend. You want to unmute yourself?
Hello, hello. So good to see you, honey. So good to see everybody.
Yeah, we just have a little group here so far. So I want to introduce you. This is my friend, Dr. Mariza Snyder. We've been friends, what did we determine? Like 10 years-ish?
At least 10 years, I think. Yes,
Yeah, we've been doing our thing with our family and our health businesses and our friendship for a lot of years now. So this is your ninth book. Is that what you said?
that's right. Book number 9.
This girl, yeah, she's a crazy reader, writer, always
There it
producing
is.
great content. Yeah. So I know we might be having different types of questions on here, but her newest book is The Perimenopause Revolution, and it's on pre-order right now.
It
And
is.
yeah, and Julie was just asking about hair loss that can be hormonal, but a lot of symptoms like are relevant to the different stages. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Marisa?
Yeah, are we talking specifically? So for hair loss, it could absolutely be hormones. It could be nutrient deficiencies. It can be thyroid issues, and so it can be a number of things. I mean, I think when it comes to hair loss, it's worthwhile running a panel, particularly like a full hormone panel and a workup, just to kind of see what else is going on. Because usually hair loss isn't operating on its own. Usually there's other things going on.
Multiple. Okay. So Julie was just mentioning that she was tested to have high cortisol. You seen that with hair loss?
I mean, yeah, do I see women losing hair also when they have, high levels of cortisol or a deregulated stress response system? Absolutely. I mean, some hair loss can be exclusively due to high levels of stress. It depends. Usually I'll see that with like kind of patches of hair loss versus more of a kind of a diffuse patterning of loss. So it depends on the type of like loss you're having.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Julie, do you want to ask a little bit more in the chat there, or if you guys want to like raise your hand to come on, that's a way we could do this as well. I just wanted people to come live. So I didn't take any questions beforehand. So if you're here, let's do it up. Let's hear what you got to say. It's just we're being recorded, but just privately for us. Julie thinks she's had more patches of hair loss. Marisa.
Yeah, then it could absolutely be more of a stress, like a situation of stress. But again, it's worth looking at nutrient deficiencies and a couple of other things. I don't treat a lot of, I'll be honest with you, I don't treat a lot of hair loss in my practice. More of what I treat is metabolic issues like diabetes, prediabetes, low thyroid function, and then a lot of symptoms specifically related to perimenopause. But the silent metabolic shifts is where a lot of the weight resistance, those types of things are what a lot of my patients are coming with.
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
you worked with PMDD?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh
so are
yeah.
you familiar with it?
Oh,
Okay.
I'm very familiar.
That's what started my whole roller coaster of health issues. That's the first ever diagnose that I ever had that led to a whole like horrible events. So I mean it's been more, I guess, more heard, but when I first got diagnosed, nobody knew what I was talking about.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
I
had
would
to
say that even
explain it.
it's still being misdiagnosed today. It's
And I mean, now that I've been so much into my journey, I think, I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but maybe PMDD is just a symptom of something more major. Like it's not the diagnosis because I've worked more on other aspects of my health that have impacted greatly, positively, the PMDD side.
yeah, what has been working for you? And where are you in your journey right now? I mean,
I
like,
mean,
where are you in the hormone? Are you in menopause or
right. No,
perimenopause? Like, are you in the eye of the storm?
I don't know if I'm peri. I don't know. I really don't. I'm 37, so I don't
Okay.
even know
So not
where I'm
yet. Yeah,
at.
yeah. So almost maybe not in peri yet, almost in perimenopause, but could be early perimenopause. I was just curious. What are they? I mean, there's a number of things that we recommend for PMDD, and some of it can be hormone replacement therapy, particularly in late 30s. It could be hormonal birth control. That can be, but often sometimes it's like an SSRI, depending on the
Well,
situation.
the SSRI, the first thing I was given, it was the birth control, which I reacted horrible to.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was more symptomatic, physical, and then I got the SSRIs, which that one went into a whole rabbit hole, a dark, and I reacted horribly to the
So a
SSRIs.
lot of medications you did not do well with.
No,
Okay, got it.
I never did good with it, and that's how I ended up. I guess my gynecologist, when she gave me the antidepressant, and I had, for the first time in my life, what was like a suicidal thoughts and
Ideation.
ideation.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, she just said, well, this is out of my field, and she sent me to a psychiatrist. But the psychiatrist that I got, sadly, I didn't get a good experience with. She was just throwing medicine at me like it was candy. Therefore, I accidentally got addicted, and it never worked. And then my journey went into, the withdrawal and trying to clear that for like almost 10 years. Because now that I'm this far in my journey of healing, I understand that I was unable to detox properly. That's why I couldn't get off the medicine, because it was the withdrawal was so severe that I constantly was feeling like I was going to lose my life. But none of the medication worked, and I just thought I had to live with it. And one of the suggestions was to remove my uterus and my ovaries at
Mm-hmm.
one point, and I really wanted a relief. I was really thinking about it, but one thing or the other stopped me from it. And forward to now, I've discovered other factors that were um, doing harm in my body that I've been working on. And honestly, I stopped focusing on the PMDD, but I've never felt like I was able to get a relief from it. I just ignored it once it got a little milder. But now that I'm working on other stuff, like more detox, more self care, I've noticed that the PMDD side has gotten easier.
Mm-hmm. With the lifestyle, is that what you're saying?
Well, I was exposed to mold for 6
Oh,
years.
yeah, yeah, okay.
The combination with being an accidental addict of the psychotropics, and then moving into a moldy house,
Mm-hmm.
and then I kind of focused on that because it was very mental. I was just having a hard time, even day by day was hard to even, the second was hard to live. So when I started focusing more on what's wrong with me, and it never got better until I got pregnant with my baby, my youngest. In the midst of all this, I got pregnant, and I thought that was my life sentence. I was like, oh, I'm really doomed. Like, there's no way this sick body and mind can. But the thing is that we never know what why we go through certain things. But the pregnancy ended up being such, I guess it brought more answers, because while I was pregnant, I was in that moldy home, and I ended up with severe POT syndrome, the
Mm-hmm.
POTS. So I ended up being bedridden for 5 months of my pregnancy. And then after that, it was a year and a half of being in a wheelchair, that I couldn't do anything. I was in a wheelchair pregnant, and then after I delivered the baby. And so then I realized that there was the baby, the pregnancy itself brought a lot more answers, that it kind of took me a little away from just focusing on the PMDD. Later, not like almost a year ago, I discovered that mold was a big issue, and maybe that's why I ended up with POTS while pregnant. So now that I'm trying to patch myself back, I guess, finding little pieces. I know that hormones are a big deal in my. I just haven't been able, because they're so tricky to. My skin looks more of. I look more. I'm aging more. My hair. When you came up, I was gonna say I want to fix my hormones to where I have your type of hair. But I know that it's my bones, my aches. I have a sense that it comes from a big hormonal imbalance,
Yeah,
and the PMDD has never really left.
yeah. I think for you, Blanca, yeah, Blanca. I mean, obviously, it's very clear that there's a lot of things happening here in terms of like a toxic overload, opportunist, not even in perimenopause, a lot of chronic issues. I mean, hormones are, such a big major chemical signalers and huge aspect of PMDD. But curious, it sounds like to me that what may have triggered some of the PMDD was, medications from the past, something that had triggered that before. Like, when did you start experiencing PMDD?
I think it was early when when I was like in my teens,
Teens?
late.
Okay.
But I think I never noticed that there was a thing. I just, society tells you you're just crazy because you're period, and I just linked it to that.
Yeah.
But I think it really I woke up when I had my first child. I went into severe postpartum depression. I had a disconnection to my child. I just felt horrible. And and I started developing severe panic attacks and rage moments. And it just went on after I had my first child. That's when everything went more, instead of physical, went more mental in my period cycles until maybe when he was 4 years old. That's when I just thought, I mean, how can I be going crazy for 2 weeks of the month?
Yeah.
How can I just hate the world and hate myself and scream at everyone? I just knew it wasn't normal. That's when I finally said something is wrong with me. And when the gynecologist went through the symptoms, she's like, "Oh, you have PMDD," and I'm like, "What is that?" It gave me a relief that finally I was diagnosed with something and that it wasn't just in my head, but then not having the answer of how to work with it or bring it back. That was the most
Yeah.
devastating part of it. But I'm
Yeah. And when
guessing
it's, mhm.
since my teens and after I had my son, it's when it really raged.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was 25 when I was 24 when it really raged.
And I know that this has been a big journey for you. And you're absolutely right in terms of hormones playing a role here, but also it's that sensitivity of these hormones to the brain. It's more the disconnect or the kind of the hypersensitivity of these hormones to GABA receptors and to serotonin receptors. And that's kind of what's driving the PMDD, particularly that connection between allopregnanolone and GABA A receptors is what it's from the preliminary research that we have. It's what we know, because we don't even have a lot of research on PMDD. I know it's no surprise that when you had mold and some of these other issues, that it exacerbated those symptoms. And I think a lot of what you've done so much of the right things, and I think you're absolutely right that pregnancy was such a godsend in a sense that it really opened the door to kind of knowing what was going on. It gave you more answers than it gave you more questions. Um, I think lifestyle is going to be a big part of this journey. And I don't necessarily know. I get, for some women that have more intense PMS and maybe, there's varying degrees of PMDD, HRT can be beneficial, but I don't know if that's true for you. I think it's going to be a lot of kind of individual, kind of guinea pig style N of one, like what's working and what's not working, in terms of that second phase of your cycle.
So my final question to this,
Yeah.
what what hormone is it lacking or producing too much or interacting with each other for PMDD to even be there?
Usually it's progesterone and GABA. It's allopregnanolone and GABA. And that's why when we give women more progesterone that turns into allopregnanolone, it doesn't tend to make things better in the luteal phase of our cycle.
So is it more progesterone, like a
Mhm.
high, and then GABA receptors are low?
Mm-hmm. Or
Oh,
there's a miscommunication between the two.
oh,
Yeah, and so instead of progesterone helping to like help GABA calm things down, it makes things worse. It exacerbates symptoms. And so when progesterone comes on the scene, all of a sudden we have this exacerbation of symptoms. And that's what we're kind of connecting the dots. And hence why for some women, hormonal birth control can be helpful because we're kind of shutting that part of the system down. But then for others, it just really depends. And it's really more so about the brain chemistry because it's the brain receiving these hormones and responding in a way. It's not the hormones per se. It's the brain saying, I don't know what to do with this. Like how I deal with this isn't like it's not the same type of signaling that would happen with someone without PMDD. So for example, I don't have PMDD. So and I'm really receptive to progesterone. So I take it and things like really calm down. But for some women, depending on how their brain responds to it, it tends to, it's the opposite of calming down. It just exacerbates symptoms. It makes things worse. And so so we can't really blame it on progesterone per se. It's kind of like endometriosis. We just take her off of stop estrogen for being produced, to stop the lesions from being created. But it's way more complicated than that, than putting a woman on hormonal birth control to manage, endometriosis lesions. So it's a more complicated situation that we think may have to do with the immune system and the way that the immune system is functioning, whether it's in the brain or for endo, whether it's, in the pelvic floor, the pelvic region. And so, yeah, I know that lends to more questions and answers. What I've learned is it is a lot of lifestyle medicine of like keeping those detox pathways open, reducing as much inflammation as possible, moving your body, balancing that blood sugar, taking a lot of, I know as a mom, it's so hard, but like carving out time, particularly alone time in that luteal phase for you, where you just have time to be by yourself.
The luteal is when you're bleeding or before you're bleeding?
Before you're bleeding.
Right?
So luteal happens right after ovulation. So when we ovulate, we make progesterone on the back end. And it's something about the progesterone, because you don't make progesterone in the follicular phase of your cycle. That's why half the cycle, you're fine. There's no progesterone there. In the second half, you get the progesterone and all hell can break loose based on those progesterone swings. And so a lot of hormones, a lot of a lot of hormonal birth control has progestins in them that can, they don't really cross the blood-brain barrier the way that oral micronized progesterone does or progesterone does, but they can also lend to just causing more trouble. So you could kind of maybe like even an IUD could potentially be helpful. The problem is that most IUDs are progestin-driven IUDs, not the copper IUD. So it may be still worth kind of playing with some things. But for you, and unfortunately, in every woman with PMDD, it's a varying degree. Like it's on a gradient. There's no like you have it or you don't. And what can exacerbate it could be things like mold or things that drive inflammation, that affect the brain. And so it's a lot of trial and error trying to figure out what's going to work for you. What I do know is that a lot of the lifestyle strategies will move the needle. But sometimes, it may not be enough. Like sometimes we want something that's in a pill form that will really, really help us. And for every woman, that's a little bit different.
Can I make some little good
Yeah.
comments
Thank you.
here? And yeah, then we'll take Nancy's question. Thank you, Blanca. So I think it's true that, working on detox, that Blanca was on a call with me earlier today for mold, like working on detoxing the brain, detoxing the extracellular matrix, like that communication that she's explaining. When we remove some extra information from the body, the body can communicate better. And a lot of that is lifestyle. And everyday detox just to keep that communication clearer. So that's so interesting, Mariza. I didn't know that some women reacted opposite to progesterone, but I have a friend who doesn't like taking it, and I was like, that's so weird. Like I love it. I would.
My mom had PMDD, undiagnosed PMDD, and I grew up a victim of PMDD. Actually,
I know that's actually why you do what you do, right?
And I will say that, in my own experience in perimenopause, I didn't really have really severe PMS symptoms. PMDD, someone asked what it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Think of it as like perimenopause, PMS's ratcheted cousin, just causing a whole lot of problems, and so a lot of it's mood related, brain related, but it can be other things too. And it was in perimenopause that I felt like I had more PMDD type symptoms than I ever had before. And that's why I wanted to ask whether you were in peri yet, Blanca, because it's going to be worth shoring up a lot of these things before you walk into perimenopause, mainly because these hormones that at least were cyclical and relatively consistent, all of that goes out the door too. And that really lends. I talk about this in the mental health chapter of the book, that women with PMDD or severe PMS symptoms, it can get much worse in peri. And so for me, I've had some PMS symptoms, but obviously there was this through line of PMDD in my family. My sister struggles with it too. It wasn't as prevalent for me in my cyclical years, but definitely felt, I was like, oh, this must be a version of that. Luckily, though, the flavor of the symptoms that I'm addressing are being managed well with progesterone, but that's not the case for everybody at all. And so, and for you, that is very much not the case. And but the things that I've seen in my own patients, besides reducing cellular inflammation, whether that's due to mold or that is due to some type of toxin, it's also going to be really prioritizing the sleep, really eating an anti-inflammatory protocol, making sure that you're balancing blood sugar. Like, what can we do to keep things as homeostatic as possible as we move through a season where things can feel a little less like a little less stable?
A little bit on the progesterone. When I was pregnant with my second son, I remember I was working with a practitioner that worked with bioidentical
Yes.
progesterone. And she was like, it's natural, it's from sweet potato, it's from wild yam, so. And I was
Sure.
having bleeding, and there was like, they thought I was going to have a spontaneous abortion. So the doctor gave me injections of the bioidentical progesterone. And it was good. And I obviously, when you're pregnant, you don't have PMDD anymore until you have a baby, of course. But I do remember that when through my pregnancy, it didn't bother me. It saved my pregnancy. My son was born fine and healthy. But after the pregnancy, I felt like the PMDD had gone a level up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's from all that progesterone that I received during the pregnancy, because it was like an injection every other day or something like that. But I remember not doing well with anything that had progesterone, and I never thought about it until now that we're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
because it was everybody
Yeah,
was saying,
no,
oh,
I
it's calming.
absolutely. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's not
And
calming.
and what a godsend that we have progesterone to maintain pregnancies and to especially in the first trimester of a pregnancy, like good, because we need it before other hormones kick. That's why it's called the progestation hormone. That's the whole point of progesterone, is to maintain a pregnancy. And it has other benefits too when the brain and progesterone are working really well together, which is supposed to be the case. But it doesn't always work like that, even though that's kind of what is expected of progesterone. It's an anti-inflammatory, it calms the mind, it helps you to get to sleep. That's why a lot of women are prescribed it. And that's not the case for everybody. Unfortunately. It's often it can do the opposite. And so I don't know if it was, progesterone doesn't have a very long half life. So you just like anything else, you use it and lose it pretty quickly. So it should have moved through the system, by the time you had that baby. But man, there's nothing like coming out of, postpartum with PMDD, that can feel just not good at all. And then postpartum into your late 30s, now you're talking about heading into another kind of hormone shift. And so we're just kind of catching you, from one hormone shift to the next. Our bodies go through three major hormone shifts, and they're neuroendocrine transitions. That's because these hormones are binding to receptor sites all over the brain. The first time is puberty, where hormones are coming online and you're heading into that cyclical childbearing year for 30 years, give or take. Anytime you're pregnant and postpartum, you're going to have a massive brain reorganization that's requiring a whole major reconstruction of your brain, and then perimenopause and menopause. And so probably out of that second pregnancy, being a later kind of a later-ish pregnancy too. It could have just been, even the pregnancy itself, the big massive brain remodeling that happened during that phase, especially with POTS and all the other things that were happening, was probably a bit of a perfect storm. Yeah. I don't necessarily know if it was the injectable progesterone. I'm not ruling it out, but I think more so it was probably the autoimmune component of the POTS and the postpartum, postpartum nature of the brain reorganization.
And I did get the injections after my son to prevent the PMDD, but it still gave me a horrible postpartum depression again for the
Yeah.
second time.
Yeah, it just
So
wasn't the right
it,
solution. Yeah.
Okay, Lunga, we're going to move on to Nancy, who can't be on the camera because she's at work, but she
Yeah.
shared, I am 50 and in perimenopause. I've been working with a functional medicine doctor, and we've used herbs and lifestyle to support many issues. Most recently, I'm struggling most with very sudden muscle loss. Any tips? FYI, I have mild hypertension and psoriatic arthritis.
Yeah, I mean, so how do we protect our muscle, right? There are a couple things that we can do. And here's the thing about muscle is that we're gonna default, even just due to aging, but definitely perimenopause as well. We are going to lose it by default. And so really what it's all about is we got to work to keep it is really what it is. It's an uphill battle for sure. And there are two ways that we do that. One, making sure that we have enough protein to actually have the building blocks to build muscle. But even with the substrate, which is the protein, unless you're building muscle, you aren't building muscle. And so that requires strength training. Testosterone can help in helping to build muscle. Growth hormone can help. Not that you would be taking growth hormone, but that would help to build muscle as well. Estrogen can help with building muscle too, especially eliciting muscle protein synthesis. So hormones can step in and support, especially give you enough motivation to actually want to lift those weights. But then we're talking about 2 to 3 days a week of weight resistance with progressive overload. And what that means is that over time, you're either doing more reps or you're doing more weight. So, for example, if you've been using 8-pound weights or 5-pound weights for the last 5 years, it's time to move to the 10s and 12s, and so you're just going to progressively keep moving upwards. That's what's going to allow for you to basically break and build those bones, or break and build bones, and kind of remodel bones, but also tear and rebuild muscle. But I will tell you that there's no quick and easy way to build muscle. And I just want to be honest about that. You can't just wear a weighted vest and walk around and build muscle. That's just it's not gonna be. I wish it was that simple. You really have to be lifting weights and being consistent. And so a minimum of 2 days a week is what it's gonna take to actually build that muscle, and then making sure that you have enough protein to actually get the job done. So I recommend typically 25 grams on average per meal to actually have enough substrate to build muscle. Because remember, essential amino acids, we need those for everything in the body. They are the building blocks of every single cell in the body. And so we need to know that we've got enough to build blocks, to build all the building blocks of all the proteins that your body needs, but also that we have enough to actually build muscle. And so that's going to be the plan in my book, The Perimenopause Revolution, because I know how mission critical this is. I have beginner workout videos, beginner workout plans, intermediate workout plans, and all the tips that you need to work with progressive overload over time. But yeah, that's why muscle is the ultimate flex, because you can't shortcut it. You have to earn it, and it takes, like, we're talking like there's never a time where you're not going to be needing to build muscle ever. I train 3 to 4 days a week. I've been doing that since I was 16 years old, and I will continue to do that for the rest of my life until I'm dead. So that's really what it would take, is you've got to be training consistently in order to actually try to maintain the muscle that you're losing, or at least build back some of what you're losing.
What do you think about creatine?
Oh, creatine's helpful too. Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's these are little helpers in the game of putting in the work.
No, I agree. I saw a little snippet online, and this guy was like, most people are getting enough protein at this point because
Yeah.
everybody's crazy about it. He's like, but they're not getting in the gym enough to actually make muscle. Like you have to do that.
Yeah, I think that there's some myths out there, I'm really mindful about, a lot of the influencers out there that are just like, just make sure you're getting your protein. Now it's like protein enough isn't going to build any muscle. It's, it's going to help you make sure that you've got the building blocks for your cellular structures, but you actually have to
Yeah.
train.
I'll be honest with my audience, I see a lot of undertraining, a
Yeah.
lot of like walking. Well, I have a lot of chronic illness people too, and they're like, well, I don't feel good. So I would
No,
also
totally.
say,
No, and
yeah,
that's a difference between moving for longevity and wanting to build muscle. Since the question was specifically, I need to build the muscle that I'm losing. I just wanted to be very honest about what that looks like.
no, I agree. And
Yeah.
I guess I would add, especially as we get older, we experience chronic illness, working out wrong will get you
It hurt us.
injured and inflamed. So you really need to work out smarter. So Mariza's got some examples in the book. A mutual friend of ours runs a fitness program for after 50. You need antioxidants on board. So you just need to work out smarter. And I just got an injury just from like squatting wrong and doing some stuff wrong because I love to exercise, but then like sometimes I'm not conscious enough. And now I'm losing muscle from not exercising. So you just have to be a lot more careful. So do what it takes to, sorry, be careful about it.
Yeah, and yes, all the things, and then walking in between. Like I don't want you guys burning out. Movement in between. I'm a big fan of just movement. I think if I could bottle movement for everybody and just gift it, I think it's the ultimate panacea for everything: mental health, cognitive health, blood sugar regulation, cardiovascular health. I mean, movement is really the ultimate thing that we should be doing, as much as possible. And but yeah, in terms of building muscle, those would be my recommendations. And yeah, and if it's, you're going to the gym for the first time and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, I would hire a personal trainer for 4 weeks. They're worth their weight in gold in terms of having good structure and function. And then when it comes to training, it's not complicated. We're talking about push and pull movements, compounded movements, squats, lunges, presses, bicep curls, tricep. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't, you don't have to get fancy with it. You don't have to get crazy with it. It's really the same basic moves. It's a little bit, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of boring, but you don't have to spend a lot of time in the gym to get it done. You can just, gone are the days where we need to be in the gym for 50 minutes. You can get it all done in 20.
Yeah, it's kind of true. You can have some weights in your garage, in your house. You can power walk with a friend, but I think it's just making it part of your routine is so important that you use it for stress relief instead of avoiding it because like you're not in the mood or even if you're not feeling great with your chronic illness, like you've got to get a little bit in because it's got to build. You don't want to keep losing, losing, losing. So awesome. I'm just gonna pull up your event link.
Oh yeah, I have a pretty link. It's just drmariza.com/thrive.
Okay, that's for the event. Dr. Mariza. Okay. So you mentioned postpartum to steady yourself, and I think that's same true for this age. You brought up a great point. I'm so glad I'm out of the mold chapter now that I'm really fully in perimenopause. Like I just got my period today. Like it just comes and goes. Please, there is zero order anymore, and I don't think it's a real period. And it's a little destabilizing. So thank God I've like got some other things stabilized. So I wonder if you could just talk more about the importance of creating that stability and like what that looks like day to day.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the big hormone shifts that I mentioned, which I think, in its own right, we really need to recognize that women's brains and girls' brains go through massive reorganization. And I don't think that that's ever been like, we're finally turning a corner and looking at brains for women, particularly in these hormone shifts for the first time. But again, to kind of what's similar to what Blanca said is that there's a whole lot of, you're crazy, your women are hysterical, like, they're just like this, they're just emotional. And I'm just like, no, in order for us to 3D print human beings, which is what women do, we have to have a pretty delicate communication between the brain and the ovaries. And so as we go through these major hormone shifts, puberty being the first one, where I think we prune back like up to 25% of our neurons. I mean, we're talking about a massive gray matter, white matter, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, limbic system. The whole thing is up for review. And it's no wonder, we always hear about girls in puberty, right? It's like, yeah, if your brain was getting completely remodeled, how do you think you're going to feel? And so that, puberty is a 4 to 6 year transition before things really steady out. And it's no wonder that, we start to see, early signs of, PMS symptoms or polycystic ovarian syndrome or PMDD, even in puberty, when the brain is kind of trying to figure out this whole hormone equation. Then things can be relatively steady for a while during our reproductive years. That's not the case for everybody, but on average. And then we go into pregnancy and postpartum. And if there's any moms on here right now listening, you know that who you were before you became a mother is not who you are today. Your brain again goes through a massive reorganization because your sole job, I ask my son all the time, he's 4. And I said, what's mama's number one job when it comes to you? And he's like, to keep me safe. That's mom's number one job. And nobody will keep that child safe like I'm going to keep that child safe. That's my job, literally. And so, but my brain was reorganized for that purpose alone, like it still is. Like if I had one mode of operation, keep that child alive and keep him safe. And so the brain has to reorganize to do that. On the back end of that depletion of hormones after the brain was flushed with them, after the massive reorganization, it's no wonder in postpartum, it can feel like so destabilizing. But then we get to perimenopause. And I would have to argue that of all the transitions, this one is the higher stakes game because now we are not ascending into, a reproductive, a childbearing kind of cyclical hormone state. We are moving out of that state. We're moving into a descension of menopause. And as a result, lots of things happen in the brain. We see more neuroinflammation, we see more deregulated blood glucose levels. Women, there's a really massive recalibration, hot flashes and night sweats, sleep issues, cognitive changes, memory, lower mental energy, less executive function. Like there's just a lot of things that are happening in perimenopause that can feel so destabilizing. The majority of women, over 90% of women, will have mood related symptoms in perimenopause, even if they've never had them before. And so it's important that we recognize and are aware that as our brains are massively reorganizing in these neuroendocrine transitions, that, it's our bodies and our brains are calling for a new level of support and awareness. And that's a big through line of what my book is all about is, can we recognize the elephant in the room, that the brain is changing? And in a lot of ways, it can feel like it's without permission. Now, tack on chronic conditions that are already existing. Because, by the time you're 40 something, you've lived a life. You've lived a life. Things have come up. Maybe you've had children. Maybe you've been exposed to something. So when you're going through this profound transition, it's not happening in a silo. It's usually happening alongside of other things. One of our dearest friends, Dr. Jessica Drummond, specifically works with women who are going through perimenopause and have chronic illness. Because when we lose that protective shield of our hormones, it can feel like those chronic conditions can become more apparent. They become more presenting. And so often with peri, it's not just perimenopause. It's usually perimenopause and all the other things that you were able to kind of keep at bay until the lid of chaos opens up, right? I like the jack in the box of surprise pops up, and as these hormones begin to deregulate, it's what it feels like. All of a sudden, everything else becomes up for review as well. And so, I think that the reason why this happens to us as women is that we are being called into to prioritize ourselves in a new way. We're being called into a massive upgrade. Um, but it requires a lot of intention. It requires a lot of boundaries, prioritizing ourselves, and shoring up a lot of the lifestyle strategies that maybe we thought we could get away with for a while, but now we really don't have that option, right? Because we're losing bone and we're losing muscle, and we're having these silent shifts that are happening, particularly metabolic and brain related shifts, where it's like, okay, now my body is calling for this higher level of intention and support. And that is the through line of why I wrote this book, is like, okay, knowing that all of this is happening and recognizing this for my patients and the women in my community, what can we actually do about it? And that first step is just grace. There's a big distinction between blaming ourselves and having ownership. I think society has taught us that blame is the name of the game for women, and that doesn't move us forward in any positive direction. But having ownership of just like, how do I advocate? How do I keep experimenting? How do I find the things that work for me? That there's an ownership in that really moves us forward into the kind of what I consider to be the most powerful chapter of our lives.
I love it. Yeah. And I would say my experience with perimenopause, which is what, like really like 10, 15, 20-year period, would you say, Mariza?
Yeah, no, it's about a 10. I would say on average, most of us will be in it for 10 years,
Okay.
a whole decade of this.
Which
When
is,
we talk about it, we talk about it as if it's going to just disappear
yeah, a lot of people
over
are
a
like,
few
I'm not
months.
there yet. I'm 48. And I'm like, girl, you've been there.
You've been there.
Calm
You didn't
down.
know, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I hosted a perimenopause summit, which feels like in a different lifetime when I was still living in Oregon and
Yeah.
kind of closing that chapter. But I was in very early perimenopause, but I think because I was dealing with mold and the Hashimoto's that came with that, my cycle got irregular. And I was like, oh, I'm in perimenopause. I started to be interested in, well, that was child's play compared
Yeah.
to what
So what's coming?
then I kind of like things settled down for a while as I kind of healed that. And then I had like the weight gain, low energy phase, which I did not appreciate, did not give permission for that, and the crying depression phase. Uh, and now I'm like injured, kind of losing weight phase. I mentioned to you, I'm feeling like I'm having some high blood pressure moments, which thank God you took really seriously because I don't think that's getting talked about enough. I just found out my close friend here got put on blood pressure medication like in an emergency type of way. So I just appreciate that you're taking this conversation to like the level of seriousness and depth that it needs to be at. Like women are valuable and our health matters. And we can't just be like talking about wrinkles and weight loss and like taking all these shortcuts to get there. Like that's just on the surface. That's not like our real life. So I just so appreciate what you do, and you're really protecting the health of women at this age because we're vulnerable right now. We like to think like mentally we're still young. Our bodies are getting older, and we're
No,
both.
and hopefully, I mean, hopefully, amen to anyone who, kind of navigates this transition well, and I would say that it's always important to be looking at your biomarkers. It's always important to be looking at some of these other metrics of your cardiometabolic health. 1 in 2 of us will have an osteoporotic fracture. 1 in 3 of us will die of mostly preventable heart attack and stroke. And when we look on the back end of menopause, particularly with the brain stuff, more women than men will have depression and anxiety. 80% of people with migraines are women. 70% or 75+% of autoimmune patients are women. 67 to 70% of dementia patients are women. I mean, I don't know how we ignore these stats on the back end of menopause. And we have to ask ourselves what is happening and when we lose that resilience and protection. And I think the research is becoming much more clear that it's in this time of erratic fluctuations of hormones, in this time of a messy middle, that we become more vulnerable. And I call perimenopause the window of vulnerability, but also the window of metabolic opportunity, because we can reframe it. And when we know what's happening to our bodies, we can pivot proactively to shore up the blood pressure changes, the blood sugar changes, the lipid changes, the muscle changing, the muscle wasting, or the bone loss. By the time we get to early perimenopause or early menopause, rather, sorry, we've lost up to 20% of our bone, but it didn't have to be that way, like it at all. The acceleration of a lot of these things is really this particular transition. And
the lack of knowledge.
And the lack of knowledge around it. The gaslighting, the telling women it's just all whatever, it's just the way it is. And I'm like, no, if we look at future health outcomes, actually, this is the tipping point. This is the time where we really need to be on top of our game. We really need to figure out what works best for us.
Yeah, and when you're kind of bogged down by symptoms and family issues, which I meant to mention, it's not just the physical stuff coming off. It's also our parents are aging, we're going through divorce, our kids are going to college. Like there's a lot happening all at once, and we can get really bogged down. But you also have to be like, okay, like what am I creating? Like where do I want to go? What do I want to learn? You have to like take control of the narrative. You can't just, be like, well, nobody wants to just be like, well, I'm falling apart. This is it. I mean, if you're on this call, I don't think that's your attitude. So you just have to get the knowledge, and you have to decide how do I want my life to look in my 50s? Like, what do I want to have or not have, health-wise, lifestyle-wise,
and 60s and 70s and 80s. Like, how do I want all of it to look? And that's literally the reason why I wrote the book. I wanted women to feel like, okay, what is the thing that I can do? Particularly for your demographic, I know that a lot of women are struggling with other chronic issues. And so what are the things that can really move the needle in a meaningful way? Like, how do we reduce inflammation? And I wanted the information to be so readily available. I know that oftentimes women, like you talked about, being in that messy middle where we just have so much going on. Like, what are habit stacks that we can do that will help us move the needle? How do we protect our mental health? How do we build community? How are we balancing our blood sugar and optimizing our biomarkers? How are we building meals for ourselves and our family? And how are we able to move in a meaningful way that's protecting our muscle, our bone, and even our sanity? And that's really the through line of this book. And then, when do we start to bring in HRT? When do we have the conversation about hormone replacement therapy if it's a fit for us? And who are we working with in terms of providers for building a tailored protocol for ourselves? And that's what I cover at length inside of the book. This event, the Hay House event, this is a Hay House book, and they're so on board with women being supported. And so I'm hosting a live event with them. Actually, right before I jumped on here, I was meeting with them about the run of show for the event and what it was going to look like. And I was racing over here after that. And it's going to be a live event. It's all virtual, and we're going to record it. So if you can't make it, you can't stay for all of it, all good. But there's a VIP portion with me and Dr. Mindy Pels. And basically you just claim the VIP by getting the book, whether you get the book on Audible or wherever you love to listen to books audio wise, or an ebook or the hardcover, whatever works for you. But when you get the book, part of the bonuses is this amazing VIP event. Some of the events free, but some of it's a VIP, particularly the part with the co-hosted event with Dr. Mindy Pels. And there's so many other bonuses that come along with this book as well, including, like I said, meeting you where you're at in terms of movement, whether that's beginner body weight movements, exercise snacks, whether that's 100+ different recipes to work from that really take autoimmunity and inflammation into account outside of blood sugar and cellular energy, or that's tracking your cycle, tracking your symptoms, labs to ask for, and self-care rituals, sleep and